Well, the U.S. Supreme Court dealing an early blow to President Trump's travel ban today. The High Court denied the government's request to exclude grandparents from the list of relatives allowed into the country under the 90-day travel ban, meaning that for now, grandparents will be added to the list of relatives who will be permitted to obtain visas. CBS News Justice reporter Paula Reid is in Washington. She's been following all of this. Paula, how significant would you say is this move?
This is just one small part of the travel ban as it is allowed to be enforced in the months between when the Supreme Court agreed to take up the issue and when they'll hear it. We now have a date, October 10th. So when the Supreme Court said that the Trump administration could go ahead and enforce the travel ban, they said that they couldn't enforce it against anyone that had a bona fide relationship to the United States. Well, what does that mean? That means if you're enrolled as a student here, if you have employment here, or if you have a close family relationship. And Rena, that term, close family relationship, that's a subjective term. And under the Trump administration's interpretation, that excluded grandparents and several other categories of relationships. After that decision, some people sued, saying, yes, grandma and grandpa should be allowed in. Here, the Supreme Court says, yes, we agree.
So, Paula, in the meantime, it was a partial win for Trump. The court also gave the government more leeway to enforce. This is a separate ban on refugees, is my understanding. It was included in a March 6 executive order that the president said was necessary for national security. What do you think that tells you?
Well, it tells us that there is a portion of the court that is willing to defer to the Trump administration. Now, specifically on refugees, this tells us that for one of the most vulnerable populations impacted by this travel ban, that the Supreme Court is willing to give deference to this policy. But the decision on refugees today, the High Court is saying, look, we're not going to protect this group. We're going to allow the Trump administration to continue to put limitations on the entrance of certain refugees into this country until the courts ultimately settle this issue about the policy as a whole. So it's still sort of a temporary placeholder, but the Trump administration could absolutely say that that aspect of today's decision is a win.
So, Paula, what do both of these new rulings tell you about the way the court might rule in October? I believe it's October 10th when it actually takes up this case.
Well, ultimately, there's a lot of good signs for the Trump administration. First of all, the court has agreed to hear this policy, and they were allowing them, unlike all the other lower courts that had heard about this case, they were allowing them to actually enforce the policy, which signals that they don't have any major concerns with its constitutionality. Now, in today's decision, we saw Thomas, Alito, Gorsuch, they were all willing to give pretty broad deference to the Trump administration in terms of how it defined a bona fide relationship, in terms of how it defined family relationships. So that's another good sign for the Trump administration. I don't think the fact that they're going to allow grandparents in is signaling that the travel ban is in any grave danger. But we'll see. You really never know what the Supreme Court is going to do. Those arguments will be heard in October, and that will be the final word on whether or not the president's second travel ban is or is not constitutional.
All right, Paula Reid, thank you for joining us, Paula.